everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Beyond the Verses podcast. I'm glad that you're joining me. Happy Monday. Well, I'm recording this on a Monday, and you might not be listening to this on a Monday, but whatever day it is that you're listening to, you can insert whatever day it is into the Happy Monday part, and just substitute the Monday for whatever day you're listening to it. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I hope you're not too stressed out right now. I know I've been feeling a bit burned out lately, but taking it to the Lord, and hopefully I'll be a lot stronger and better. But yes, today we're going to be looking at a story in the book of Genesis, one that may be familiar to you, one that may not be familiar to you. It's in Genesis 32, and I'm going to read specifically verses 22 to 37. And it says, "During the night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, along with all his possessions. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he could not defeat him, he struck Jacob's hip socket as they wrestled and dislocated his hip. Then he said to Jacob, 'Let me go, for it is daybreak.' But Jacob said, 'I will not let you go unless you bless me.' 'What is your name?' the man asked. 'Jacob,' he replied. 'Your name will no longer be Jacob,' he said. 'It will be Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed.' Then Jacob asked him, 'Please tell me your name.' But he answered, 'Why do you ask your name? Or why do you ask my name?' And he blessed him there. Jacob then named the place Peniel. 'For I have seen God face to face,' he said, 'and I have been delivered.' The sun shone on him as he passed by Peniel, limping because of his hip. That is why to this day the Israelites don't eat the thigh muscle that is at the hip socket, because he struck Jacob's hip socket at the thigh muscle. This story has always been a very interesting one to me. I think right from when I was little. I may not have really understood it completely, but it just always fascinated me. The thought of Jacob wrestling with a divine being, and then having the boldness and the courage to say, 'I'm not going to let you go until you bless me,' because it just showed that Jacob was aware, he was sensitive enough spiritually to recognize that he was not fighting or wrestling with a mere mortal, but he was wrestling with, God, and he was like, 'I'm not going to let you go until you bless me.' And God honored that, because he was like, 'You know what? Yes, you have tried, you have wrestled with me, and I'm going to give you that blessing.' But that's not even really the main thing that we're going to be talking about today. I had written down like 5 takeaways from this particular passage, and of course it's not an exhaustive list because I'm just one human being, but it's just things that they are just things that stood out to me, and I just wanted to share. Number 1 is that God is there with us even in the deepest, darkest struggles that we are facing. Jacob was in trouble. At this point of the story, Jacob had finally been let go. Like Laban had finally let Jacob go, because Jacob was fed up with being treated unfairly and being cheated over the years while living with his father-in-law. And now he was on his way to meet up with his brother, whose birthrights he had stolen when they were much younger. And if you remember earlier in the book of Genesis, it was like Esau wanted to kill Jacob because Jacob had deceived him so terribly and had stolen a phenomenal blessing from him, because he had lied and deceived their father Isaac. And Jacob was on his way to meet this person who he had wronged so badly. But even in that, we can see that everybody, every living thing experiences trouble in this life. And, but even in the midst of that trouble, even in the midst of that situation that Jacob was in, God still appeared to him. God still showed his face to him, because Jacob named the place Peniel because he said, 'For I have seen God face to face.' So it was like in the midst of that trouble, God still showed up. So I don't know whatever trouble that, you might be facing, But just be comforted by the fact that no matter where you are, no matter what circumstance you're facing, no matter what trial or tribulation you're going through, that God will show up. God is showing up. He will never just leave us alone. He will hold our hands through it all and guide us, where we need to go and help us get through it. Number 2 takeaway was that Jacob speaks with the unknown man that he wrestles with. They have 3 conversations in total, even. And the lesson here is that in the midst of our struggles, we are able to speak with God. So it's not that God will just show up. He not only shows up, but he also creates an avenue where we are able to speak to him. Now, we believers of today, we are no longer, under the Old Testament law. We have a new order of things that we are under. And so we have direct communication with God because of what Jesus did for us on the cross of Calvary. His death and his resurrection served as what's the word I'm looking for? Serves as a sacrifice, and Jesus serves as our mediator. So he brought about reconciliation. Yes, that's the word that I was looking for. Jesus' death on the cross and his resurrection served as a reconciliation act between God and man, and it restored that relationship that was broken in the Garden of Eden, right? And so because of that, we are able to speak to God. We don't have to go to a high priest to offer sacrifices on our behalf. We don't have to go to a Moses and say, oh, help me ask God this. We can come to him directly in our bedrooms, in our cars, wherever the case may be. We can speak to God. We can journal our prayers to him. We can pour out our hearts to him. And so in the midst of our struggles, we are able to speak to God. And because we are able to speak to God, he hears us. It's not a one-way communication. It's not just us talking, but he speaks back to us. You can see that they have a conversation. A conversation is not something that happens with just one person. A conversation has to have more than one party involved. And so we see that God speaks to us. He shows up and he speaks to us and he listens to us and he hears us, even in the midst of our struggles or whatever it is that we are wrestling with. Number 3 takeaway is that God transforms us through our bitter experiences, giving us hope. After Jacob wrestles with this man, God changes his name to Israel, which means God protects. And of course, when I keep on saying this man, I don't literally mean an actual man. You know what I'm trying to say, but it just makes it easier. But God changes his name to Israel, which means God protects. And God blesses him after he has wrestled, And, in the Bible, it says, your name will no longer be Jacob, it will be Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed. And so we know that Jacob's name actually meant deceiver, right? And so we see that obviously there's that element of what we name our children or what names we carry actually do play a very important role in how our lives turn out. I mean, I don't think it always works that way, but then I do think it's very important. The names that we give ourselves, the names that we carry, what we use to identify ourselves with, because his name meant deceiver, and Jacob was a big time deceiver. He was a deceiver. He came from deceivers as well. Another episode will talk about generational patterns, just looking at the book of Genesis itself, just seeing how children took on their parents' negative and positive traits, But yes, God changes his name, which means God protects. And so we might be faced with a very difficult situation, and sometimes it's easy to say, God, why would you do this to me? Why would you put me in a situation like this? But more often than not, the reason why God allows us to go through certain things is because he wants to refine us. He wants to transform us. He wants to prepare us for what he's about to hand over to us. A lot of the experiences that are handed to us serve as training ground for that which lays ahead. And so you might be going through a very difficult season right now. And I don't know, everybody has different, degrees of difficulty, but difficulty nonetheless. And you might be going through a very difficult season right now. But then what you can focus on is that at the end of the day, there is hope, because God is going to transform you. You are going to come out with a different name, with a new identity. You're going to come out stronger, with a stronger faith, with stronger resilience, with more hope and faith in God and more trust in Him, because He will refine you. And that you realize that when you encounter problems in the future, it's not that you wouldn't have any problems anymore. It's not like when you go through this season, the next seasons are just going to be wonderful and amazing. No, it's just that when the next difficult season comes, you remember, you can cast your mind back to saying, God showed up for me. God spoke to me. He heard me. He gave me a new name when I came out of that rough patch. And so I can trust that He will do the same for me in this other season that I may be struggling with. Number 4 takeaway is that if we call on Him in our difficult time of struggles, He will answer and hear us, even through the darkest hour of our lives. I think I've already kind of touched on that, so I'm not going to repeat myself. But yes, the important thing is when we are faced with difficult situations, who we should go to is God. It's a lot easier to focus on the problem rather than focusing on God, because the problem can look so mighty. But we also have to remember that our God is bigger than our problems. Our God is bigger than anything that we think may be too big to swallow us. And that's the beauty of it. We don't have to deal with it ourselves. We have a God who is willing to take our burdens. Jesus literally said, "Come to me, all you who are heavy laden and burdened, and I will give you rest." We have a God that is willing to carry our burdens, literally, and He literally did that on the cross. So we don't have to deal with all of with our struggles alone, because we have God. Number 5, in your daily struggles with life, do not worry. Jesus tells us not to worry. Anytime you worry, you become unproductive, and worry reduces our ability to trust God. Now, I'm going to be honest. I'm a huge worrier, right? I struggled, and sometimes I still struggle with anxiety, because I'm one of those people, and I'm sure there are many of us who like to have things planned out. You want to know where XYZ is going to take you. But God doesn't work that way. God doesn't reveal the big plan to us, because if He does that, then we're not going to need Him, because we already know where we're going to end up. But He gives us little instructions along the way, and He says, okay, just follow it, do this, and then when you do that, then another door opens, and another door, and another door. And there's also, when we look at the news nowadays, all of the news channels are filled with, conversations about the war, the Russian attack on Ukraine, and how people are having to emigrate to different countries to seek refuge and shelter. And in the midst of that, there's still racial discrimination. People are dying, children are dying, people are starving, people are cold, they are homeless. Then there's COVID-19, then there's the new variants that are coming out. Then there are other epidemics, ever smaller epidemics that are happening alongside the global pandemic. And then we have in Nigeria here, there's fuel scarcity, fuel prices are on the increase, the price of food is increasing, the cost of living is getting higher, but our wages are remaining the same, or perhaps maybe even going lower. And it's just constant worry. You're filled with so much negative news that you can't help but worry. You cannot help but worry. And we will not be human beings if we didn't worry. But the thing is, Jesus tells us that we don't need to worry, And it's not that He doesn't understand that there is pain in the world, that there is suffering in the world. I like to think about the moment at the Garden of Gethsemane when, Jesus was about to be taken. Judas was going to come any moment from there and take Jesus and kiss Him and say, "This is the one." And Jesus knew it was about to come, and He prayed to God and He said, "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, but not my will, but thy will be done." In that moment, Jesus was anxious. He was in pain, right? He was worried because it was a hard thing to do. But at the end of the day, he also understood something important, which was it was God's will that He came to do, nothing else. So in the midst of our suffering and our pain, God is telling us not to worry. not to worry, because worry makes us anxious, and anxiety immobilizes us. Anxiety doesn't move you to action. Anxiety keeps you in place because you're so filled and consumed with thoughts of what if, thinking of all the worst possible scenarios, and you aren't even being moved towards action, because anxiety is from the devil. It's not from God. And this is one of my favorite verses in the Bible, Matthew 6:34, when Jesus says, "Therefore, do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble." If you're a Nigerian, what Jesus is basically saying is like, problem no dey finish. Like, and if you're not Nigerian, that just means like problems are never ending, you know? There would always be a problem. There would always be something new that pops up. So he's saying today, focus on today. That's why in the Lord's Prayer, it says, give us this day our daily bread. It doesn't say give us this week. It doesn't say give us this month. It doesn't say give us this year. The prayer itself says give us this day. It's you basically putting your trust in God and saying, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know what's going to happen next year. I don't know what's going to happen 10 years from now. I don't know where my 5-year plan, or whether my 5-year plan is even going to actually work out the way I want it to. But I'm asking that you give me this day what you have planned for me. And so we shouldn't be anxious about tomorrow, because tomorrow already has enough problems. But what we need to do is trust that because God is there for us and He comes through for us, we don't have to worry. Now, there's a difference between worry and concern. When the Bible talks about us not worrying, it's not saying don't have any feelings of concern, about certain situations. It doesn't mean don't be concerned about the racism that's prevalent in our world. Don't be concerned about the discrimination, the different forms of discrimination in our society. It's not saying don't be concerned about the depraved acts of humanity that are taking place, the war crimes, genocide, rape, child abuse, all of those things that are happening, abortion. Do not be concerned about those things. But God is just saying, don't let those thoughts consume you, because the truth is, like this, the world that we live in, there is going to be pain, there is going to be suffering. I feel like I didn't even plan to go on this tangent and I'm just going off, but let's go with it, let's run with it. There's going to be suffering in this world. Yes, be concerned. Do not let your heart grow cold, because it's easy for us to become desensitized to wickedness because we see it every day. But God is saying, just don't let it eat you up. Don't let it consume you, because we have a hope that we are looking forward to. As believers, we know that this world we are just passing through. This is not our permanent home. We don't have to put all our stock in here. Yes, in our own different spheres and career paths and wherever we find ourselves, whether you're a homemaker or you're in the you're in public office, or you're a government worker, or you're a customer care worker, or whatever it may be, in your own little sphere of life, enact change. Be a change maker. Everything that we are entrusted with is an opportunity for us to show the love of Christ, so do what you do best well, and speak out against any injustice that you notice. Don't be afraid to say the right thing because you want to seem politically correct. The difference between, and I think the scariest thing about worry is that worry reduces our ability to trust God. And I was having a conversation with an uncle of mine the other day, and I confessed to him, like, I worry a lot, and I feel like it's me just not having enough faith in God. And it's good to have those kinds of inner moments of self-reflection, because it's good for you to analyze where you are at and try to figure out, why am I worrying so much? Is there a particular cause for this worry, or is it just something like, God help me, show me the way? The difference between worry and concern is that worry immobilizes us, but concern moves us into action. So yes, let us be concerned about the things of this world, but let us not allow ourselves to be filled with anxiety over them that cripples us and causes us to not be able to go out and do that which God has sent us to do. And so yes, lastly, those are the 5 takeaways that I took. But when I was reading it again now, I just remembered when Jacob was like, "For I have seen God face to face and I have been delivered." There is something about encountering God, that transforms your life. Jacob says, "I have been delivered." And I like to think that he's saying he has been delivered from his old life. His name has been changed. And it's not even just a name change, but it's literally an identity change. Because his name went from meaning deceiver to meaning God protects. And from him came a lot of descendants. God extended his line through Jacob, right? So God gave him a new name. God gave him a new identity. God changed his life, transformed his life, essentially delivered him from his past mistakes and gave him a new opportunity to be the man that God needed him to be. And so this is why, it's important to have your own personal encounter with God. Don't just rely on what a pastor has said or what a friend has said or what you've read in a book. Like, those are all great because it's good to hear from other people because it builds up our faith. I love, sermons and books and conversations with friends. But if you feel like you haven't had that personal encounter with God, I will encourage you to pray to God. Say, "God, I want a visitation from you. Let me encounter you in a way that I never have before. Something that would make me know that you are real, that I can feel you tangibly, and it may not necessarily be like you'd have this burning bush type vision that Moses had, and it may not be anything crazy. It may be something very seemingly inconsequential to you. It might be very simple, you may not hear a loud booming voice or whatever the case may be, but I promise you, when you encounter God, you will know, and your life will never be the same again. No matter how far off the rails you go, when you have encountered God for yourself, I strongly believe that the Holy Spirit will always pull you back and you will find your way back to God. And so my prayer is that, like in the same way Jacob encountered God and was radically transformed from this single encounter, is the same way that every single one of us will encounter God and be radically transformed, and that we will not just encounter God one time and just move on with our lives, but that we will keep on encountering Him in wonderful ways as we grow in our faith, ways that will just make our life and our walk with Him just that much more sweeter. Oh wow, this was a lot longer than I planned for it to be, but I'm thankful that, I'm thankful for this platform that I've been given, and thank you for listening all the way to the end with me. And I hope you have a wonderful day today, and I pray that this has encouraged you if you've just been struggling or you're in a dark place, or you just needed a reminder of how much God loves you and God cares for you. I hope this encourages you and has blessed you. Thank you and have a wonderful day. See you next time. Bye.